at 7:14 in the morning. Flight Petty Officer Tadayoshi Koga gripped the control stick of his Mitsubishi A6M0 as the Pacific rolled beneath him like hammered steel. The sky was clear, the horizon calm, but the war had already found him. His aircraft carried fresh bullet holes along the fuselage, and a thin vibration traveled through the wings with every second he remained airborne. Fuel was running low. The Zero's engine, once smooth and confident, now coughed with uneven rhythm. Koga was 20 years old. He had trained for years to defend the Empire's airspace, memorizing formations, emergency procedures, and the belief that surrender was unthinkable. Below him, the ocean offered no mercy. Ditching meant death. Capture meant disgrace. Yet staying aloft meant nothing at all. He scanned the sea again, eyes narrowing as something gray cut across the blue flat, unnatural, moving against the waves. A ship, long, wide, with markings he did not recognize. Smoke drifted from its deck, but not from damage. From routine operations, Koga circled once, then again, heart pounding harder than the engine. He believed he had found a friendly carrier, perhaps damaged, perhaps silent. He lowered altitude, lining up carefully, focusing on the familiar geometry of landing speed, angle, distance. As his wheels touched the deck, men froze, shouts erupted, guns swung. The Zero rolled forward and stopped. For one long breath, the war held still. Then reality crashed in. The insignia on the deck were not Japanese. They were American. Koga had not landed on safety. He had landed inside the enemy's hands, and the mistake would echo far beyond the steel beneath his feet, because this single landing would quietly alter the balance of air combat in the Pacific. And as the shock rippled outward, the story could only continue into who he was and how he came to this moment. Tadayoshi Koga was born into a fishing family on a small island in Japan, where the sea shaped both livelihood and mindset. From childhood, he learned discipline, early rising before dawn, respecting hierarchy, and enduring hardship without complaint. Aviation promised escape from waves and nets, but it demanded obedience just as strict. When Koga entered flight training, instructors emphasized precision, silence, and loyalty above all else. Pilots were taught not only how to fly, but how to think. Hesitation was weakness. Capture was failure. Survival mattered only if honor remained intact. By 1942, the Pacific War had expanded with frightening speed. Japan's early advances relied heavily on the Zero, a fighter that shocked Allied pilots with its range, maneuverability, and climb rate. Light, agile, and deadly in experienced hands. It was also fragile, lacking armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Japanese pilots knew this. They compensated with skill and belief. Koga had flown combat patrols and escort missions, absorbing losses quietly as familiar names disappeared from rosters. Each mission narrowed the space between duty and fear. On the morning of April 18th, his unit was scrambled to intercept unidentified aircraft approaching Japanese-held territory. What they did not know was that American bombers had already struck, and chaos followed. During the engagement, Koga's Zero was hit by ground fire while strafing a small island airstrip. The damage seemed manageable at first, but oil pressure dropped. Fuel leaked. Instruments flickered. Radio contact faded. He broke formation, searching desperately for a landing site. The island below appeared suitable, flat, isolated, with a cleared strip. What Koga did not know was that the island had been secured by American forces and was operating under U.S. control. Exhausted, focused only on survival, he committed to the approach. His training told him to land cleanly, quickly, without drawing attention. The landing itself was nearly perfect. The realization afterward was devastating. American sailors rushed the aircraft, weapons raised. Koga did not resist. Witnesses later described his expression not as fear, but confusion. He had not planned to surrender. He had not chosen capture. He had simply run out of sky. The Zero was secured, examined, and guarded. Koga was taken away injured but alive. Within hours, American officers understood the magnitude of what sat on their deck. An almost intact Zero, something they had never possessed before. As the aircraft was crated and prepared for transport, the war shifted quietly. Engineers, pilots, and tacticians would soon study every weakness and strength of the Zero, but none of that would have been possible without one exhausted young pilot whose personal struggle between survival and belief now pushed the story forward into the moment where an impossible idea began to form. The Zero was shipped under heavy security to the United States, its journey hidden behind routine paperwork and silence. For American engineers, this was unprecedented. Until now, knowledge of the Zero came from combat reports, fragments recovered from crashes, and second-hand accounts from pilots who barely survived encounters with it. Now they had a complete machine engine, wings, controls waiting to be understood. They approached it carefully, aware that what they learned could save lives. Test pilots examined the cockpit, noting its simplicity and lightness. Every design choice favored agility over protection. During test flights, the Zero performed exactly as feared and expected. It turned sharply. It climbed fast, but it also revealed limits. At higher speeds, controls stiffened. In dives, it lost stability. Its lack of armor meant one accurate hit could be fatal. These discoveries were not celebrated. They were documented quietly, translated into tactics, and distributed across squadrons. Meanwhile, Tadayoshi Koga's fate remained uncertain. Accounts of his final days vary, but records suggest he did not survive long after capture. Dying under unclear circumstances, his name faded quickly from official narratives, replaced by diagrams, data tables, and revised training manuals. Yet his unintended role endured. Allied pilots were instructed not to dogfight the Zero, but to use speed, diving, attacks, and teamwork. Losses decreased, confidence returned, the sky became less one-sided. For Japanese pilots still flying, the change was sudden and confusing. The Zero no longer dominated. Encounters felt different. Enemies disengaged when needed, attacked from angles once thought impossible. No announcement explained why. No order acknowledged the shift. The machine remained the same, but the war around it had changed. Koga never intended to change the course of aerial combat. He sought only to land, to breathe, to live another minute. Yet war does not measure intention. It measures consequence. His landing exposed truths hidden within aluminum and rivets, truths that strategy would later exploit. This transformation from feared weapon to understood machine marked a turning point, not because of innovation, but because of accident. As engineers finalized reports and pilots absorbed new doctrines, the Zero lost its aura of invincibility. Not overnight, not completely, but enough to matter, enough to tilt survival odds. Enough to remind everyone involved that wars are often shaped not by grand plans, but by exhausted individuals making decisions under impossible pressure. And as these revelations spread quietly through briefing rooms and cockpits, the story moved forward, gathering momentum toward the moment when knowledge met action. And theory would soon be tested under fire, leading directly into the impossible idea that would redefine how the enemy was confronted in the air. The Zero did not arrive in America with fanfare. It arrived as a problem, inside a guarded hangar, under neutral lighting. Engineers stood silently around the aircraft that had haunted pilots for months. No speeches were given, no flags were raised. There was only the sound of boots on concrete and the slow ticking of cooling metal. The impossible idea forming in a room was not to copy the Zero, but to understand it so completely that it could no longer surprise anyone. At first glance, the aircraft seemed almost fragile. The skin was thin, the structure light. One engineer ran a hand along the wing and remarked quietly that it felt more like a racing plane than a combat machine. Yet this was the same aircraft that had outturned, outclimbed, and outranged Allied fighters across the Pacific. The contradiction demanded answers. Engineers dismantled panels carefully, documenting every bolt, every cable, every compromise hidden beneath the paint. Test pilots approached Zero with caution. They were not eager. They were curious. The cockpit was cramped. Instruments were minimal. Protection was almost non-existent. One pilot noted later that sitting inside it felt like wearing the aircraft rather than flying it. When the Zeo lifted off for its first test flight, observers held their breath. The plane performed beautifully at low speeds, turning tightly, responding instantly. But as speed increased, weaknesses emerged. Controls stiffened. Recovery from dives became difficult. The aircraft demanded precision and punished mistakes. The impossible idea sharpened into doctrine. The Zero was not unbeatable. It was specialized. It thrived in close, turning fights and suffered when forced to react. Engineers and tacticians worked together, translating data into survival. They rewrote engagement rules. They taught pilots to resist instinct, to break away instead of turning, to use altitude and speed as shields. The goal was not dominance. It was balance. As reports spread through squadrons, skepticism followed. Pilots who had lost friends to the Zero were slow to trust paper conclusions. But training flights confirmed the findings. Simulated engagements showed that discipline could defeat agility. Speed could defeat turn radius. Teamwork could defeat individual skill. The impossible idea was no longer theory. It was ready to face reality. None of this erased the human cost. Every page of data represented blood already spilled. The Zero sat quietly in the hangar, stripped and reassembled, its secrets exposed not by force, but by accident. Tadayoshi Kogai's name did not appear in these documents. His role was implicit, unspoken, yet inseparable from every conclusion reached. The war moved forward without him, carrying the weight of his unintended contribution. As pilots absorbed the new tactics, tension grew. The next encounters would prove whether understanding could replace fear. Briefings ended with silence. Men checked straps and fuel lines with steady hands. The impossible idea would soon leave the safety of controlled tests and enter the sky, where mistakes were final and learning came at terrible speed. And as aircraft engines swarmed on distant runways, the story crossed the threshold from preparation to execution. The first real tests of the new tactics came without announcement. Patrols lifted off into skies that looked no different than before, but everything beneath the surface had changed. When Zeros appeared on the horizon, pilots resisted old instincts. They did not turn sharply. They did not chase. They climbed, dove, separated, and regrouped exactly as instructed. The sky became a moving puzzle rather than a spinning trap. In one engagement, a Zero latched onto an Allied fighter, closing in confidently, expecting the familiar panic turn. Instead, the fighter dove hard, gaining speed, pulling away just beyond reach. Another aircraft joined from above, firing briefly before breaking off. The Zero turned, then turned again, bleeding energy. For the first time, its pilot was reacting rather than controlling the fight. The engagement ended without celebration, only relief. Reports multiplied, loss ratios shifted, encounters grew shorter. Pilots returned with fewer holes in their wings and more clarity in their voices. This Zero remained dangerous, especially in skilled hands, but its shadow no longer filled the sky alone. Knowledge had narrowed the gap, not erased it, narrowed it. Japanese pilots felt the change immediately. Opponents no longer behaved as expected. Fights ended abruptly. Targets escaped vertically. Attacks came from angles once considered safe. Confusion replaced confidence. The aircraft had not changed. The battlefield had. And because the source of that change was invisible, morale eroded quietly. The high drama of this phase was not in single heroic duels, but in accumulation. Each survival reinforced trust in the new doctrine. Each loss confirmed its necessity. Squadrons refined timing. Wingmen learned patience. Commanders adjusted formations. The Zero was still respected, still feared, but no longer far from these skies. The captured aircraft remained grounded, its role complete, It no longer needed to fly. Its purpose had been fulfilled the moment its limits were understood. Engineers continued to refine reports, but the war had already absorbed the lesson. The Zero's dominance had peaked not when it was destroyed, but when it was explained. For those flying combat missions, there was no sense of triumph. Only a grim understanding that survival now depended less on bravery and more on restraint. The sky punished arrogance. It rewarded discipline. Pilots learned to disengage without shame, to live without chasing victory. These were hard lessons, written not in speeches, but in after-action reports and empty bunks. As weeks passed, the balance of air combat continued to evolve. New aircraft entered service, new tactics layered over old ones, but at the core remained the accidental landing of a single Zero, and the execution of an idea once thought impossible, that understanding an enemy could be more powerful than outmatching him. And as this execution phase settled into routine, the consequences began to spread beyond the cockpit, shaping strategy, production, and training, carrying the story inevitably forward into what followed after the skies themselves had changed. By late 1942, the air war over the Pacific no longer felt the same. The Zero still appeared in combat reports, still claimed victories, still demanded respect, but it no longer dictated the fight. Pilots on both sides sensed the shift, even if few understood its origin. History often records turning points as battles or speeches. This one arrived quietly through diagrams, memoranda, and changed instincts in the sky. The captured Zero reshaped training programs and aircraft development. Engineers emphasized the armor, dive speed, and structural strength. Pilots were taught patience over aggression, teamwork over solo skill. These changes did not end the war, nor did they eliminate loss. They reduced uncertainty. They replaced fear with calculation. In war, that difference mattered. For Japan, the loss was invisible but profound. The Zero had been designed around a philosophy that valued offense and maneuverability above survival. Once opponents understood this, the design's strengths became boundaries. Pilots continued to fly with courage, but courage could not compensate for physics. The sky became less forgiving. The historical significance of the incident lies not in who won or lost that day, but in how fragile dominance can be. A single aircraft landed by mistake stripped away mystery, and when mystery disappears, power follows. This was not espionage, not betrayal, not defection. It was exhaustion, damage, and a human decision to land rather than disappear into the sea. Military historians later noted that no single machine decides a war, but some moments accelerate change. This was one of them. The Zero did not stop being dangerous. It stopped being unknowable. That distinction altered strategy across thousands of miles of ocean and years of conflict. As the war pushed forward into harsher phases, newer aircraft replaced older ones, and the Zero gradually faded from the front lines. But its story remained embedded in manuals, lessons learned, and the quiet understanding that even the most feared weapon carries limits waiting to be discovered. And as the dust of daily operations settled, the story narrowed again from stratagem back to the individual whose unintended action helped reveal those limits. Tadayoshi Koga did not live to see the consequences of his landing. His name rarely appears in headlines or victory lists. There are no statues, no speeches, no official recognition tied to his final flight. Yet his story endures precisely because it was unplanned. He was not trying to change the war. He was trying to survive it. His final decision was not heroic by traditional standards. It was human. Faced with fuel loss, damage, and isolation, he chose ground over water, life over disappearance. The meaning of that choice was assigned later by people he would never meet. War often reduces individuals to symbols, aces, heroes, enemies. Koga fits none of these categories neatly. He represents something quieter, the reality that wars turn on ordinary moments, on decisions made under exhaustion, fear, and incomplete information. The Zero he flew became an object of study. He did not. His legacy is indirect, scattered across improved tactics, altered engagements, and lives that ended or continued because pilots knew when not to turn. History remembers outcomes, it forgets intentions. In telling this story, there is no victory to celebrate, only understanding. The sky does not belong to one side. Neither does history. Both record actions, not beliefs. And sometimes, the most influential act of a war is not a planned attack, but a mistaken landing that forces everyone to see more clearly. This is the history of World War II. Whoever oppresses the innocent is an oppressor. Neither the earth belongs to this oppressor, nor does the sky belong to him. We stand now and forever with the oppressed. Audience questions. Number 1. How many wars have been quietly reshaped by accidents no one planned to remember? Number 2. If survival leads to consequences you never intended, are you responsible for what follows? Number 3. Was the most powerful weapon in this story the aircraft or the knowledge gained from it? This is WW2 Files. See you in the next one.